G'day guys, and welcome to my humble abode. Today we're going to be talking about a game that I really love and I recently went back to as part of my journeying back to take a look at the games of my childhood to try and rekindle that passion for video gaming that I have. And that game is Breath of Fire. So Breath of Fire is a game that I originally played for the SNES back in the day, and it was one that filled me with wonder. It was a game that when you played it, I was saying just, in fact, earlier today that when I played Breath of Fire, I would go into school afterwards the next day after playing all night, and I'll just pretty much draw pictures of monsters and, you know, Ryu and Nina attacking and trying to defend themselves with, like, Bo the Wolfman. And so it was like that kind of RPG experience that I came to really expect from RPGs that weren't 8-bit back in the day, because I had played my Final Fantasies and my Dragon Quest, but Breath of Fire was really the first RPG that caught my attention because of its vivid graphics and its really colourful cast of characters. So going back and seeing Breath of Fire, I noticed that sometimes it's better for things to stay in your memory, and I don't mean to disparage it at all, but Breath of Fire is definitely a dated game. Its story is much more simplistic than I imagined, well, when I say imagined, than I remember, because it's mainly just you have got to go and stop the Emperor Zog, who's a dark dragon. And you being from the Dragon Clan yourself, you set out at the very start of the game to try and save your sister. Now, how these events unfold is pretty predictable, but it does have a couple of twists to it, and it does have two different endings, which was very annoying when I was younger, because I found out I didn't actually get the real ending until this time. So all those years I was walking around thinking, like, man, what a weird way to end the game. I was wrong. Turns out you need to get all the dragon transformations and do all your training in order to get the real ending. When I think about Breath of Fire now, I definitely can see that it's showed its age. It's a wonderful game, and it has all the heart there, but it still hasn't built upon it. And it would go to do so in 2 and 3, but for the first outing, I mean, it's really just pretty bare bones. To go back with today's standards, you're going to kind of do yourself a disservice. I would only recommend it to people who are really big fans of the JRPG genre, because when it comes to things like Breath of Fire, Dragon Quest, and Final Fantasy, you really have to take yourself back to a different time. You have to kind of lower your expectations, because these were stories that were made on the frontier of RPGs. So you're not going to be expecting some massive opera that's going to be written with all these different acts, twists and turns. You're not going to be getting something like a Final Fantasy VI. But you can definitely see that these are the building blocks that they would expand upon in the future. If you have an appreciation for just the character or the art style, or even if you're looking for a kind of whimsical JRPG that you're just looking to mess around with a little bit, have a little bit of fun in, then Breath of Fire is definitely for you. You might not finish it, you might only go for a couple of hours, but you'll definitely have fun with those hours. Keep in mind though, with all this said, you will have to try and keep your expectations down a little. If you go back in like me, because I had these memories of like this vivid cast of characters, but it turns out that it's just one of those things that you do as a kid. You build up these characters and you make the spaces in writing with yourself. You say, okay, well, I'm going to fill in the blanks with these ideas that I have for the characters. And while that certainly is a good way of storytelling, it's definitely something that requires a little bit of an adjustment to go back to. Filling in all the blanks for all the characters seems like the writer's job these days, and I'm not so accepting and willing to fill in those blanks as much anymore. I prefer to have a writer try and craft a narrative perfectly than have a kind of gap-filled narrative that requires me to fill it in for them. Some stories that is great for, Breath of Fire is not one of them. You have a massive party, but most of them are going to be rendered completely useless once you upgrade Khan and his fusion ability, and even right at the end when there's a fusion ability that will pretty much just make your entire party one person. So once you can get to that point, you'll realize very quickly that that whole party synergy is just not really worth it in comparison to that final transformation you'll get, and you do feel a little like, oh man, why did I put so much effort into leveling up everybody when I should have just been leveling up maybe one or two guys? That being said, I do love like all the individual characters of your party. Very simplistic, but I love the fact that each of them has a world ability that makes you like, okay, well, I've got to make sure that this guy's useful. Or, okay, I really like this guy's design. Like, I like Gobi, for example, and Khan. They're really cool. And even from my youth, Bo still remains that kind of really cool looking design. And that's nothing to say of Ryu and Nino, who would definitely be coming back and are kind of the Breath of Fire staples to the series, the poster people of the series, if you will. Those people are great, and I can't wait to see more of them if I do go back and play Breath of Fire 2, because I definitely recall Breath of Fire 2 being my favourite of the two games that I played when I was younger. I never finished 3, and yeah, I can't wait to jump into those ones. And as for this whole journey back into my childhood, I think that it's been good to make me realise, hey, you know, maybe you should take off the rose-tinted glasses every once in a while, because I did love going through Breath of Fire, but boy was it tedious at times. There's a really lack of a direction in which way to advance in certain stories, and you have to go back to that certain way of talking to everybody and trying to piece together. If someone says one random little bit of information that might seem like it's special or significant, or it might even be insignificant. So, like, someone might come along and say, hey man, John likes flowers, and you're just like, oh, I don't know who the fuck John is, but then you come across this random boss in a dungeon, and you're like, oh shit, it's John, and then you go through your item abilities, or you go through your bag, and you're just like, give him flowers, and then it's just like, the John fucking walks away, or you need those flowers before you go fight John, for example. So, once you get yourself into that mindset, and this seems to be the repetition of what I'm saying, lower your expectations, you're in for a good time. If you go in with today's expectations, you're not going to have any fun at all. Anyway, that's like Breath of Fire. I do recommend the SNES version over the GBA version, but the GBA version does fine in Substitute. It's just a little bit different with certain quality of animation and some of the music, which I really liked. As for the music, it's really fun and whimsical, and that seems to be the whole nature of the game, really. While it does have a couple of dark moments, and I was really surprised at one of the bosses in particular, who I won't mention, but there's a very touching moment with them and an NPC that I was not expecting. And while it is simplistic, you can definitely see that the developers tried to convey an emotion in that small scene. That being said, there's a lot of bosses in this game, like that one aforementioned, that's pretty fucking annoying. So, I mean, it's really a mixed bag. I loved it when I was a kid. I like it now. Breath of Fire is still great, but maybe it was greater in the time that it was released. I'm the Nerd Pilgrim. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you guys later.